Try to see as your mind moves around from one place to another place and doesn't have samadhi. Don't control your mind, afraid that it's going to move around, and then holding it still is incorrect meditation, incorrect samadhi. That's tight and uncomfortable. So just know, be aware in a relaxed way. The body is breathing out, the body is breathing in. Just be aware of that. The body sitting, walking, standing, lying down, be aware of that. The body moving or still, be aware of that. Know that often. Some of us, our minds are too busy, so it's too difficult to see our own minds. The mind's out traveling out to this and that all the time. So if we're not able to effectively see our minds, then notice the body first. Be aware of the body. When we know the body is breathing out and in, just know so with a relaxed, natural mind, not a stressed one that's holding, controlling, or forcing still. Just be natural, normal. See that the body is breathing in and breathing out, not focusing in on the breath. That will make the mind too still and sometimes tight and uncomfortable. Just be aware that the body is breathing. Yesterday, somebody mentioned they were knowing the breath and the mind got peaceful and the breath got really shallow right to the tip of the nose and then disappeared and changed to a bright light appearing. There was happiness and rapture. There was a type of samadhi that we call samatha meditation. The samadhi that is really important for us to practice is the type where we are the aware one, the knower, awake and joyfully so. So see the body breathing, see the body standing, walking, sitting, lying down, see the body moving and still, and be the observer of that. The mind will wander off or move to work. We might breathe, just notice the breath a moment, and the mind will run off and do something else very quickly. So if we're knowing the body sitting, breathing, standing, walking, sitting, lying, and then just we'll know for a moment, and then the mind will wander off. When the mind moves off, we know that is so, and we know it again and again. And then gradually we'll be able to achieve the real awakened one, the correct samadhi that is the observer. So our body is sitting. Are we able to know or be aware that the body is sitting? I don't see that's hard at all, right? How hard is that? And the body moving, is that hard to be aware of? There's nothing hard about it. It's just a natural, normal experience. The body moves and we just are aware of that with a natural, normal mind, not a stressed one, not hazy or blurry. Become aware very often, and once we're able to be the stable observer, we see that the body breathing is observed and the mind is the observer. The body standing, sitting, walking, lying down, The mind is the observer. We'll be able to separate the aggregates. If we're developing wisdom, the first thing we have to do is have the mind that is the stable observer, that type of samadhi, and then we use that samadhi and put it to work. See the body working, and the mind is the knower or the watcher of that. So we see the body as that which is observed. And then feelings, like the feeling of feeling happy or unhappy, is what is observed. And the mind is the observer. We can separate these things and separate feelings from the mind. Sometimes we separate the feelings and the body. So, for example, the body is in pain. The mind is the watcher. So the body is sitting there. The mind is the watcher, and then pain comes into the body. You can see that the pain that comes in is not the body. It came into the body, and the pain is also the mind. The pain is another aggregate. Aggregate just means like parts. So or portions. So there's the body portion or part. There is the feelings part, the sensations part. There's the memory part. There's the different formations in the mind that come up part. And then there's the mind part. These are the 5 aggregates. The things that we think are us, we can separate out into parts. The Buddha separated it into 5 parts, and he did a good job of that. We don't have to separate it into anything more than that. We can just trust the way that the Buddha separated things out into these 5 parts. So with the stable observer, we can separate the mind into these parts. We can see the body breathing, standing, sitting, walking, lying down, still or moving. The mind is the observer. And feelings arise. And we can sense that these feelings are not the body. We can be sitting, and then pain comes in to interfere with the experience. With the mind as the observer, we can see that the body is one thing, and the feelings that arise, like the pain, are another thing. We're able to separate the body and the pain. At first, we separate the body and the mind that is observing, seeing all the movements, the body breathing, moving, or still. And we're able to separate the body from the mind that is observing. After a while, we sit for a while and we'll walk back and forth. And then for walking a while, we get achy or we get some pain. See, that's something that comes in later. The body was already there, and then the pain comes in as a separate part, a separate thing. So these Vedanas, or feelings that arise in the body, are not the body, and they're not the mind that observes. And the mental feelings as well, like happy and unhappy, those come in as something separate as well. And that isn't us either. It is that which is observed. The mind is the observer. So we can separate all these things, and that thing that we thought was an us is really just separating. We can separate these parts that we think are real, that we think are us, and separate them into parts and see that there isn't a self, that everything, when we separate everything out, it's just empty of a self. The word vipachawiti in Pali, it means separating out the parts. So it's like we see a car, right? And we think the car is something real. But if we separate the car out, we dismantle it into pieces. Like, for example, is a wheel, is that the car? Or we separate the engine out, we separate the exhaust system, the steering wheel, the bumpers, the seat. We separate these pieces out and we see none of these pieces is the car. But then when we put all these pieces together, we then interpret that, okay, this is a car now. So the Buddha taught us, just like this car analogy, when we're able to mentally separate these parts, all that's left are parts, and there is no self, just like there is no car. When we separate the pieces of a car, we don't call it a self, we don't call it a car anymore. So when we separate all the pieces, the parts here of the body and mind, separate these 5 aggregates, then we see that there isn't a self. So these 5 parts is, the first is the body or form, rupa. The second is vedana or feelings. There's the mental feelings and the physical feelings. So there's happy, unhappy, mentally comfortable, uncomfortable of the body, and neutral of the mind. Then the third is sanya, which is memory and interpretation, where we're able to compare and contrast. Like we know a cat, right? We've seen a cat before. So we've also seen a tiger. They look similar, they have similar postures, but we're able to distinguish one from the other using our memory and interpretation. And there's even a deeper way to interpret as well, which is being able to interpret what is the right way to look at things. Like, for example, with vipassana, interpreting correctly that which isn't permanent really isn't permanent, or that which isn't a self isn't a self. Right? We love ourselves, and because we believe that there's really a self and this body is a self, then when we get sick, we're upset, right? When we get old, we're upset. When we're going to die, we're upset. And that all comes from wrong view, from understanding incorrectly and believing there is an us. So we interpret this incorrectly. There really are just 5 aggregates that are impermanent, that are suffering, meaning they can't persist, they're oppressed and are falling away. There's dissolution happening. And the truth that things don't happen the way we want them to, things aren't under control, they happen due to causes. When we have the observer mind, the stable mind that arises from being able to see the mind moving out, right? So if we're able to be aware of the body sitting or breathing, we're only able to do that for a moment or so, and then the mind moves out, wanders off, travels here or there to see, to hear, etc. We come to know that has arisen, and we get familiar with that. Then when the mind moves out, we know so. The mind moves to think again, we know so. Each time the mind moves out, and we know so, the knowing mind arises. So when I ask you to achieve the observer or the stable observer, then that doesn't mean forcing the stable observer to happen or intend for that to happen. We just know the mind that has wandered off, and then the knower mind or the stable mind arises from there. And we do that often, and then we'll have a stable observer. We can watch the body breathing in and out, walking, sitting, standing, laying down, and the mind is the watcher, the observer. We can separate in that way. And then there's the comfort and discomfort of the body or of the mind that come in, and they aren't the mind. the strange things that arise in the body or that arise in the mind, they aren't the mind. So the body that feels comfortable or uncomfortable is one thing, or the body is one thing. The comfort or discomfort in the body is another thing. The comfort or discomfort of the mind is another thing. The mind is the observer, and we can separate the parts. So there is conventional truth, and then there is ultimate truth. Ultimate states or ultimate truth. So convention is the opposite of ultimate truth. Some people believe that ultimate truth is the opposite of memory, and that is certainly not correct. We require this memory or perception aggregate. It's not an enemy of anything. We require it to start to understand correctly, to see the truth of non-self. So we won't have vipassana insights happen if we don't have this sanya or perception memory aggregate. We all have wrong view, or we're mistaken about the way things really are. Like, for example, we think that things that are impermanent are actually permanent things, and that's incorrect. We're not understanding correctly. We think things that are actually suffering, we think that they're happy things, or at least that they're happy sometimes and suffer other times. But the truth is that they're only suffering, just a little suffering and a lot of suffering. And similarly, with the case in non-self, we can't control things, but we believe that we can. You see, so we don't understand correctly. There is this perception that interprets things incorrectly, but once we understand things correctly, we have right view, we'll be moving in the right direction. So presently our perception is off. It's not seeing things the way they actually are. And so our sanya or perception is not in line with the actual truth. We're foolish or ignorant. We don't see things the way they actually are. So once we learn the Buddha's teachings, we have to separate the aggregate and see, are the aggregates permanent or impermanent? Is the body permanent or impermanent? It's happiness and unhappiness. Are they permanent or impermanent? Are the different mental formations that arise permanent or impermanent? And the mind itself, is it permanent or impermanent? The mind is impermanent because one moment it is aware, the next moment it's the thinker. The next moment it is the knower of what we're seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, or knowing our thought objects, our stories. Right? So it's impermanent. It arises at the eyes, ears, nose, mouth, body, tongue, and body. It arises in thought. It arises as the knower. So the word impermanent means something that was just there is not there now. Or something that is not there now, and then the next moment it is there. That's what impermanent means. And suffering or unsatisfactoriness, the second characteristic, that means that phenomena are oppressed and are going to dissolve. Like happiness is something that comes up and then it dissolves. It's under oppression to go away. Right? Can the happiness stay a long time? Like if we win the lottery, for example, we get the first prize, we make 20 million bucks. And at first we're happy, And then the happiness fades away. We start to get worried. Are people going to steal from us? Are they going to take this money? And we might be in debt and then worried, okay, here comes the holder of our debt. And the happiness just lasts a moment and then it fades away quickly. So things that were there and then disappear, that's called impermanence or anicca. The fact that things are under oppression and are under stress and are falling away or to dissolve, that is called suffering or unsatisfactoriness. And then the fact that, or the characteristic that things arise out of causes and effects and aren't under anyone's control, that's called non-self or anatta. Things don't happen because we ask them to or command them to. They happen out of their own causes. That's anatta. So with the arising of the stable mind, we're able to separate the 5 aggregates and then see the truth of them. So how do we do this? We see the body sitting and breathing, and we are the mind is the observer. Then after a while, some pain arises in the body. You see that isn't the body, that's something that comes in after. And then when the pain comes in, then the heart gets irritated and wants, we want to move, we want to get up and fix it. Right? We can see that the pain is one thing, and then the anger, the feeling irritated with the pain is another thing. Right? Can we have physical pain without mental pain? Yes, if we practice. They're 2 different things. They're 2 different parts. They're different aggregates. So the mind that is knowing is an aggregate. The pain is an aggregate. The body is an aggregate. And the mental formation of irritation is an aggregate. The body is demonstrating impermanence. One moment it's breathing out, the next it's breathing in. One moment standing, one moment sitting, lying down, etc., moving. The body demonstrates suffering, thirst, hunger, having to use the washroom. All these things are suffering. The body is oppressed by suffering. There's no one that can resist or avoid this. There's always oppression coming into the body. If we drink too much, we die. If we eat too much, we die. If we keep eating, fill ourselves up too much, we die. The body is moving towards death at all times. And we mostly don't see that or really have a look at that. In fact, we avoid looking at that truth. And the body is dissolving, and it is something that can't be controlled. So impermanence and unsatisfactoriness or suffering and non-self are all happening all the time. The feeling happy is impermanent, unhappy is impermanent, neutral is impermanent. Happiness comes up, it's under oppression to dissolve, and unhappiness is under oppression to dissolve as well. When we're sitting and meditating for a long time, after a little while we get numb. We start getting pain and numb, our legs get all numb. And then if we sit for long enough, after a while, the numbness disappears and the pain can disappear too. We can get right up and just be completely as we were. So even the numb leg is impermanent. And can we order or can we make that numbness not happen? Of course not, right? Can we make hunger, thirst, or any of these other pains that come into the body not happen? Of course not. It's not under our control. So as the observer that is stable and impartial, we see that all formations, all the body and the mind are nothing but impermanent, unsatisfactory, and non-self, not under control. How are these good things? They're things that are under oppression. They're not us. There's nothing permanent. When we see this, once the body is being cremated, when, for example, at a funeral, when the body is being cremated, does the ghost cry? No, the ghost doesn't cry about it. Just let the body go. The body is a suffering thing. So all mental formations are impermanent, unsatisfactory, and non-self. So, for example, faith is a mental formation. When faith comes up, oh, I want to go to listen to Luangpor Pramote, I want to go to the temple, I'm going to reserve a spot, right? But after a while, and it's hard to reserve a spot these days, the faith can turn into lazy. And so the faith disappears and replaced by laziness. It's impermanent. Sometimes you can finally come and be here and sit and listen to the Dhamma talk and you feel great. And then after a while, you start getting bored or tired or irritated and you want to leave, you want to go home. And it's not, the feelings aren't permanent. How about when we're young and we want to get married, but then after a while, our marriage grows old and tired? So the wife that we wanted so badly and loved so much, now she's just like another object in the room, like a chair or a lamp sitting there, right? We get neutral towards her in some cases. Although some people have done merit together well, have been meditators together and shared merit, and they can be happy together. That's very hard to find couples that are actually meeting each other in order to develop higher together. The rare thing. Usually they're just the holders of each other's karma. Sometimes not allowing us to, preventing our decisions to make merit or get in the way of our meditation, right? That comes from, these types of things come from results of our bad karma in the past. Like, for example, start becoming a good meditator, but then we die before any results happen. That's from bad karma of our past, the bad actions in the past and getting results. So let's keep practicing and seeing that everything is impermanent, unsatisfactory, and non-self, that this body is not something good or special, the feelings are not good or special, the memory or perception isn't good or special, mental formations are special things. You start to see the truth that the body and thoughts and all the things that happened in our mind, our heart, we see the three characteristics of them. We start to get bored of them, dispassionate toward them, disenchanted. And once we're disenchanted, we start to become equanimous or impartial to all these things. And from being impartial or equanimous, then liberation occurs. And there'll be no more clinging, grasping, and clinging to these aggregates. There'll be nowhere to be born again. we'll see for ourselves the way that it works. The masters have passed this knowledge along. I'm not showing off here, I'm teaching what the masters taught me. So how do we practice the Dhamma? Keep the 5 precepts and then train. Pick a meditation object, and when the mind leaves the meditation object, wanders off, come to know so often, and then we'll have the mind that is the stable observer. Once the mind is the knower, the observer, let's see the body and see the feelings and see what happens in the mind, and see the mind itself and see their true characteristics. The mind itself, one moment it's at seeing, the next is at hearing, one moment, the next it's in thought. You see the mind as the watcher, and then it's in thought. It is not a permanent thing. After a while, when we see the truth again and again and see that happiness, the body and mind aren't things that bring happiness like we thought they were. We start to get dispassionate towards them. And then as we get more and understand more and more, our wisdom grows and develops. Then when the body starts to die and dissolve, then our mind doesn't waver in regards to that. The mind doesn't mind. So in training, we have to see the mind moving out. Once we have seen the mind moving out again and again and have samadhi, or the observer, then we're able to separate the aggregates and see the truth of them. And then the mind will not be attached to the aggregates when it sees the truth of them. Like a car that is so old that we lose attachment to it. We're not pleased with the car when it's so old. It's like there's nothing special or nice about it anymore. We can crash into things and don't care anymore. The body is just a result of old karma. It's nothing special. It's not a good or great thing. We can keep seeing the truth, and then as we see the truth, we'll one day not suffer anymore. Why do we suffer? Because we think that this body and mind are going to bring us happiness. The world is going to bring us happiness. We want happiness that lasts and suffering that doesn't. See the truth of impermanence. Let me understand what these 5 aggregates are now. They're 5 parts. We can separate ourselves out into 5 parts, like separating a car. The car can separate into steering wheel and springs and nuts and bolts, not a car. So for us, it is 5 parts. And when we see these 5 parts working, you see there isn't a self. It was karma that built this body and mind as a conglomerate, not a self. So first question, I've listened to Luangpor for a long time now, and this is my first time submitting my homework. I'm starting to see phenomena. Is it true or not? It is true. Your mind has developed quite a bit. Next, see the body and see happy and unhappy feelings aren't you. See that all the different mental formations are not a you, that all there are things that are impermanent and not us. You have samadhi. You're doing well. See the body breathing all day. That's the best thing to do. In fact, I do that. Number 22 says, I think I haven't been developing at all with my practice, but the Buddhist teachings that you teach, I know that it really does help. Right now, I feel sad and bored of the world. There's a lot of aversion, and I don't have much power to the mind. I keep trying to practice and listening to your CDs, your talk on CD during the day. I'm getting better at being with the mantra. Can you please give me some advice? You're practicing correctly, but try to notice that the mind has wanting to be free of suffering in it. Try to know that wanting. That wanting is making us suffer. Wanting to be free of suffering. Suffering is causing suffering. Wanting is the cause of suffering. It's hard to practice when we're happy, but when we're really suffering, we'll practice more vigorously with more diligence. I saw this for myself when I was working in an office. There would be a lot of stress, and there wasn't happiness in the heart. So then I changed jobs to a really great job. The boss was great. The work was easy. But then looking back, I saw that I practiced more diligently when I was suffering than when happy. It was when work was easy, then it was harder to practice. The mind just sort of enjoys the world and enjoys things. But really, it's suffering that helps make our practice stronger and gives us the will. This body and this mind of ours, that's what we call suffering. So when the suffering that we usually feel arises, that's suffering of the mind. Right? The suffering in the mind is something that isn't consistent, right? Even if we're suffering a lot, sometimes it's stronger, sometimes it's weaker. And can we see that we can't control it? We can't stop it. The thought comes in and then the suffering comes back, right? The suffering of our heart comes in after we think about something. And can we stop this process? No, we can't. We can't stop the mind from thinking. And then after we think about something and then we suffer because of that, we can't stop that either. There isn't anything that we can control. There isn't anything that we can prohibit from arising. When we see the truth clearly, then we won't suffer anymore. Like, for example, if our heart is broken and we'd like to get our love back, we suffer. But if we see that a broken heart is normal and natural, and being away from the things that we want or love is an inevitable necessity, right? Then our heart doesn't waver or suffer in the face of truth. That things are just normal. We're suffering, that's normal. We're suffering, and then we want it to go away. Yeah, that's normal too. We just see everything as just normal and natural phenomena arising and falling. It's much easier to practice when we're suffering. When we're happy, it's hard to practice. Number 29. I've been practicing for over a year. This is my first time reporting. I try to practice walking, meditation, and sitting for 30 minutes a day. Most of the time I'm sleepy and there's forcing. I'm trying to have mindfulness in daily life. I see that I'm an angry person. I try to see the anger, but not usually in time. You can't notice mental phenomena in time because the defilements need to arise first and then we see them afterwards. So anger arises and then we know so. Greed arises, then we know so. The mind gets lost and then we know so. But just don't know afterwards, but don't know too long afterwards, like the next day. That's too slow. And you see that the mind is moving, flipping around, not happy with this, not happy with that, displeased. Take a look and see that you can't force the mind to not suffer and to stay happy. We're not trying to make the mind happy, peaceful, and calm. Instead, we're practicing to see that everything that comes in and out of our life are impermanent things. They come and go. They can't be controlled. This is what we want to see. If we practice to want to be good and peaceful and happy, we won't be successful because this just isn't the truth. Peace, happiness, and being good, these are impermanent things. We want impermanent things to be permanent, temporary things to be permanent. This can never be. So from now on, when the mind is angry, just know so. Greedy, just know so. Lost, just know so. Don't expect that the mind is going to be in a good or happy state. Know in a quantumous way, in a way that you're not interfering with the phenomena, and then the practice will improve. Next question. When I see feelings arise, like happy, unhappy, or neutral, do I just see new phenomena as they come? Or do I try to see the clearest phenomenon? Because when I'm trying to observe a phenomenon, there's other phenomena that just keep coming in. I'm not sure what to watch. Please advise. You're practicing well. What's wrong is that there's a little bit of over-focusing going on. If you don't focus in, then we'll just know whatever phenomenon arises in the present moment. Each moment, there are many, many different mental factors that occur at the same time. That's normal. So with so many different factors and formations happening, there'll be one star of the show. There'll be the prominent figure. So just know that one. If our mindfulness isn't strong enough and our wisdom isn't strong enough, oh, this one hasn't gone away yet, and then this next one comes up, right? So the mindfulness isn't strong enough yet, isn't fast enough yet, or sharp enough yet. Like, so if we're looking at an actor speaking, right? An actor speaks, and then his enemy speaks to him afterwards. And then after the enemy speaks, then somebody else speaks, right? And the enemy that was speaking is now gone, right? So there's always the one that's speaking, the one that's acting at any given moment. So that's the one we see. The other one is gone, and then we see the next one. There isn't one phenomenon that is the main phenomenon that remains as the main phenomenon all the time. It just keeps switching. They all just do their role, and then they pass away or stop. And then there's another one doing its role, and then that one passes away. So one actor speaks, and then the other actor interjects, right? And like, oh, that one hasn't finished speaking yet. Right? We don't do that. We just, the next one comes, and then the next one comes. Just one is the main presenter at each time. We just see that one. Next, this is my first time here. I've been watching you on YouTube and practicing about a month. In my practice, I Budo and breathe in the day and in my meditation. I think I'm improving, and I have some advice. Keep practicing as you are. Breathe in, Bud, breathe out, Do, and then notice the mind that one moment it's calm, the next moment it's busy, one moment it's happy, it's unhappy. Keep breathing and Budoing and see things as they are. Your mind is a busy one. Can you see that? The mind is scattered. So just breathe in Budo and then study your own mind intermittently. Don't just sit there and wait to see what happens in the mind. Just breathe in and out. Don't breathe in and out. Okay, now how's the mind? Okay, now how's the mind? Don't do that. Just breathe and Budo, and then when the mind is peaceful, no so. The mind is restless, no so. We feel frustrated about that, no so. Just breathe and then see phenomena as they come. Your mind is pretty busy right now, but keep practicing, it'll get better. Number 49. This is my annual report. In the past, you asked me to see the mind that is scattered as my main object. I'm able to see it more and more. I see it changing all throughout the day. I think there is some development, but my mind is not impartial. You have improved, and you're smart to know that the mind is impartial. You don't have to force the mind to be that the mind isn't impartial. You don't force the mind to be equanimous. You just know that the mind isn't, and the mind will become equanimous on its own. We don't have to interfere with the mind that isn't equanimous. When it is seen, then the mind becomes equanimous on its own. Keep practicing and we'll see things as they actually are with a mind that is stable and impartial. That's pretty good for 1 year's practice. You're getting better. '53. My mom taught me to meditate since I was little. The last 9 years, I've been able to keep the 5 precepts as well. I've been watching your YouTube for 5 months and trying to see the body and mind as they are, Rupa and Nama, not as a self, and all demonstrate the 3 characteristics. Please advise. Keep knowing, and let's not conclude the truth yet. If we conclude now that everything is impermanent, nothing's a self, it's suffering, then that's just thinking. Our heart won't believe that. The mind is still a busy mind. Please know when and see that. When you're not able to see the mind, then just see the body. Like the body breathing, the body moving, the body still, just knows when it is. The mind wandered off. Did you see that? Just have a meditation object and let the mind wander off, and then see that it has a mind still busy. Just keep practicing. And the last student, I've been watching breathing and repeating a mantra, but the heart just doesn't like it. Can I just do Buddhist chanting? Will that help? Don't practice using too long of a chant, because if it's a really long chant, the mind can wander off for a long time. Or if we do walking meditation, it's similar. We don't want to walk in too short of a distance. It can be irritating. If it's too long of a distance, then our mind gets lost for a really long time. So similar with chanting. So if the chant is just Budo, 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 some of us get irritated by it being too short. Right? But if it's too long, then we just can forget about it for really, really long. Like our mind can get lost for long periods of time, or be lost 500 times before we know once. So Bhutang Saranang Gacchami, Dhammang Saranang Gacchami, Sanghang Saranang Gacchami. This type of a chant is not too long and might be ideal for some, but it's probably too long for lots of people. People are all different. For me, just Budo is too long. So we have to see which, for ourselves, which length of chant works for us. And once we're able to find a chant that is the right length for us, then we have to keep practicing with it, and don't just do it a few times and then change again, right? That's just a busy mind and restless mind. So it doesn't matter which chant we pick, Namapata, Samarahan. Some people use metta. These are all examples of different chants. Some are too long. Some are old chants, and some are chants that some masters thought up on their own. This is a new one. It's repeating now. Can we remember all that? It has a rhythm to it. When we chant with a rhythm to it, the mind can get more and more peaceful as it goes. If there isn't a rhythm to it, we won't be peaceful. Just find what works for us. But don't spend so long trying to find a chant that we're out of time for our practice, right? That's just a busy mind. To just find one that works and we feel pleased with, comfortable with, and we don't get lost for long periods. Our mind doesn't wander off that long. So you can use chanting, but don't recommend chanting long chants. Okay, that's all for today. Tuesday or Wednesday, I went to Chiang Mai to Master Duang Di has passed away, and I went to pay respects. Going up to Chiang Mai, I stayed at a place called Ban Pron because I know the monks there. I noticed while traveling, like in the plane and the airport, they have social distancing. We're about a yard apart or a meter apart. But we can see in the airplanes and the airports, they're much closer together than we are. Maybe we could fit more people in here. Everybody that comes in, we measure their temperature, make sure they wear masks and don't talk to each other. Sit quietly at a distance. We have to keep wearing our masks. We don't take our mask off to sneeze so that the mask doesn't get wet. Right? We don't let our nose come out of pop out of the mask, right? So let's not be somebody that spreads disease or the virus. And if we keep very careful in this way, then maybe we can allow more people to come in. We have 75 people in the room each time. And within 8 minutes, all the reservations are booked. It only takes 8 minutes to fill the room for the whole month. Now, let's be careful. Let's not get too upset that we can't come into this room, right? Being upset is a defilement. What happens if we're really upset about it? and we die then we become a ghost or a demon. So we can't have hundreds of people in the room quite yet, but maybe we can invite a few more in to keep it at the proper standard like the airport has. Okay, that's all. So this coming Saturday, we might add a few more people to the hall. But let's get people who haven't had a chance yet to come in. Let's let them come in, not the same people.